Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Better go outside. Had to carry her outside to go pee.
Welcome to another Cellar Door Skeptics. Oh, I think it's episode 137. 137, man.
Yeah, it's like Psalm 137.
That's more than two episodes a week.
Well, we were gonna do that Psalm 137 thing where.
Oh yeah.
This is one that I know. This is one that I know because it ends with "Happy is the one who dashes your infant children against the rocks." This is the whole one about Zion. This is the freakiest one, and I always use it as like, "Oh, songs are so beautiful." Yes, they are. Yes, it brings a new thought of like the pictured rocks in Michigan, like the northern Michigan ones or something. The painted rocks. I mean, well, yeah, it's pretty gnarly.
You're right, and you know the funny thing is, I have a shirt with this on it.
The psalm on it.
Yeah, just that part.
Well, yeah,
but I have a T-shirt somewhere. I don't know.
Is it a metal shirt or an atheist shirt?
It's an atheist shirt.
Well, as I say, either one of those would work.
But it would be awesome if it was a metal shirt. I should send it over to like Converge or Slayer or something. Can you imagine like a Slayer thing where it's got this like demon with a baby in its hand and it's like the baby's going, "Oh no."
Yeah. Well, the lead singer of Slayer he's a Catholic, so like he likes to use the imagery, but he doesn't like to knock it too bad, as far as I know. But
either way, so tonight we have a pretty amazing episode for you. We have a full hour with a Democratic candidate named Fred Wooden.
Yeah, wooden, as in wooden horse.
Or wooden bridge. I don't know. But
yeah.
We decided this year we wanted to do more local politics. And that was one of the big things for the discussions this year. And we wanted to ensure that we try to promote some politics before the primaries and again before the general election. So tonight we had on Fred Wooden for Congress. He's in Michigan's 3rd district. He's a real person for the people. I don't know. I hate all those campaign things. I get you got to do it, but you know, like once you actually hear the interview, you're gonna go, okay, he really. In fairness, he really is a person for the person. I mean, he has spent a lot of time in humanitarian circles. He spent a lot of his life dedicated to serving the public.
Yeah, and it shows. I mean, the guy is one of the reasons why I've been following him around as much as I have been. Like, he's not in either of our districts for campaign because we're both in the 2nd, but he's been a very impressive leader, and so I've been sharing his stuff. I have his name written on the side of my vehicle. If everyone follows our Instagram, they can see a little video that I got. So I put up the 2nd district, the 3rd district, and the governor's race. So I have Rob Davison for the 2nd district, Abdul Assayed for governor, and Fred Wooden on my back windows, because you know what, I can't do a whole lot. I can't afford to go out and buy signs, but I can put something on my car and force people to look at it when they're stuck at a stoplight.
That is very true. That is extremely very true. Before we get to our interview with Fred Wooden, I wanted to and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this tonight, but at my work right now, we have a need, I guess. And I have a friend that I've worked with for the last 2.5 years. This morning, he got the sad news that his 6-month-old has passed away. And I don't want to bring the whole episode down with this, but
like SIDS?
It's not officially released yet, but
okay.
that is pretty much what we believe has happened. But in an effort to try and continue, to help people, right? We're a humanitarian show. We like to do humanist values. And, one of the big things here is we don't have socialized medicine. We don't have basic income. This individual is going to have to struggle through how much time he needs off, as well as being able to support his family through this tragic time. And so I've posted a GoFundMe. You're welcome to donate or share as you like. But any help will be a benefit to the family as they go through their trying time.
Man, I don't know about that. That's how I'm sad. That makes me sad. I've got a 3-month-old upstairs, and I can't imagine what that would be like. I would definitely need help and assistance from friends and family. So I hope that guy gets the best of everyone around us. I definitely highly recommend everyone to chip in if you can to try to make his life a little easier.
Yep. And even if you just share the post, I have it public on my Facebook. Tomorrow we'll post it on the Cellar Door Skeptics Facebook as well as my own. And again, just even a share just helps the family in need.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't want to make this a down episode. It's been a very trying day for me as an individual. But at the exact same time, this is why we want to talk to more progressive candidates. This is why we want to help try and figure out, how do we change the politics of our current government? And Hannah and I have made a commitment to say, how do we support local politics more often, bring the interviews to you, and how do we be able to have these conversations so that you can make educated decisions in who you want to elect as your public official? Because if you're not out there voting, all you are is saying, hey, I don't care what's going to happen. And I'm sorry, but like at this current time, if we don't go out and vote, if we don't go out and change the electoral college, if we don't go out and change what we're going to see as individuals, if we don't go out and change our freaking counties, all we're going to do is compound the issues that we've been seeing for the last 2 years.
Well, not voting is making a choice. It really is. Not voting is making a choice. And it's to leave the system as is if it's problematic or whatever. Not voting, the non-voter is the one who won the last major election. So this is something that we definitely want to change. And hopefully just giving some people who don't have a voice. Fred doesn't have a huge war chest. He doesn't have a huge platform. He is, he's just a good guy coming from the community. And he's been an important person throughout Grand Rapids for a long, long time. And so he definitely deserves any place that give him a place to talk, and we definitely wanted to give him a spot tonight here.
Yep. And without further ado, we welcome Fred Wooden for Congress in Michigan to the show.
So where do we want to start?
Well, we could start all over the place. How about that?
You got to start someplace, guys. Come on, pick a place.
Right. Well, so the first place I want to start is I'm excited to talk to somebody that's going to oust Justin Amash. How about that? I could just say that.
There you go.
That's my favorite spot to start.
Well, we got to get there first, and that's part of the challenge. And we live in a system where we have primaries. So on next Tuesday, people are going to go to the polls, lots of them, and make a decision. And it's difficult because we have good choices all over the place. It would be great if we were all like really, really good and really, really bad, but in each party, we're pretty similar.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we've run into as far as trying to find a nice happy medium where we can get as many people together concerned about the middle class and the minorities and the non-cisgendered people, just to try to get everybody together. And Chris and I, one of the things we like to do is basically concentrate on science and education, local politics, and then obviously we're the Cellar Door Skeptics, so we do definitely have a lot of secular and non-believer content on here. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been so interested, is because you have a great campaign going, very very progressive, very inclusive. And it seems like it'd be totally just fine to have a bunch of secular non-believers running around helping out too.
It would be. Absolutely cool.
So that's pretty much.
I think one of the myths out there is that all the people who work in religious life are like hostile to people who don't share it, and that's just a non-fact.
Yeah, and I think you've participated in interfaith committees for years, and so is the church that you represent. So
yep. I'd say somewhere between 25 and 50%, that's a big range, of the people in my congregation would categorize themselves as either deeply agnostic or non-theistic altogether.
Hmm.
That's something most people don't get. Like, why would you go to church if you don't believe in God? And I think that's because we live in a society, a Christian society mostly, that defines religion as believing in this or that proposition. And that's not always the way religion is functioned. One of the ironies is, if you ask, for example, Buddhists what they believe in, if they believe in God, they're going to look at you funny because they know there is no God. But that doesn't mean they don't have religion.
Yeah.
Okay, religion is the practice that one undertakes for one's spiritual wholeness, which can enjoin a deity, but not necessarily. And my own theology is pretty straightforward. And I put it in pretty cheeky terms. I say, any God that needs to be believed in is not worth believing in.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, that's an area that we could definitely find some moderate ground in, especially with all of the people in your congregation. And so, like, that's one of the things that we talked about when we were trying to figure out who and what to support in the area. Obviously, Chris and I are both in the 2nd district. We're both probably going to be voting for Rob Davidson, the doctor who's been posting a lot about his healthcare plans and how he experiences the world in healthcare. Essentially, what we're looking at is we want to support a guy that's going to be, obviously working his way through Congress and trying to get some stuff pushed forth. You don't have a whole lot of experience in there, and so that's one of the things that you got a lot of stuff in other areas though. Where would you get some connections on that?
Okay, let me give you 2 really fun facts. 1, Rob Davidson is a part of my religious community. He actually he came to me before he ran, saying, I've worshipped here, I've come here. What kind of advice can you give me? So I'm really pleased that he's got such a great handle on things.
Yeah.
So first of all, we're tight. We bump into each other from time to time. I'm seriously jealous of his campaign war chest. He's in excellent shape. So that's a reality. So yes, and he and I line up 100% on the things that matter. And he's younger, and he has a bus and everything. So yes, I am. You go vote for him. Vote for him twice if you can.
Oh
yes,
no! We don't want to vote twice.
I mean, not voter fraud, people. I'm just show extra enthusiasm here. But you're asking about experience now. I'm going to push you a little bit and say, and a physician is more equipped to be in Congress than someone who's been working in, forgive me, politics most of his life. It may not be government, but I've been in politics my whole life.
Yeah. And see, on my side, that's kind of the interesting side of you. When we look at what's going on in terms of, politics in the United States. And, somebody like, we'll just say number 45 has a hard time coming to the table outside of his business acumen, right? But
absolutely,
that attracts the GOP because they see all this, they look at that side of it and they go, well, that's where I should side with. Yep. You, on the other hand, maybe you don't have the political experience other people do, but you do in a whole different manner. You spent your time serving the community.
Oh, absolutely.
You spent
and not only serving a community, I serve it on things like boards and organizations that are far more similar to a legislature than they are to a business.
Absolutely.
When you run a business, you say, we're going to do this, and people do that. When I try to run a church, I go to my board and say, can we do this and how? And then they either like it or they don't, or we find someplace in the middle. That's called the dickering, the politics of real life. And so actually I've been doing the political process of negotiating, compromising, proposing alternatives for 40 years. I have no illusions about how complicated it is to herd a bunch of cats. So So unlike Sandy Pensler on the east side of the state saying he's going to go clean up Washington, and I laugh out loud. I said, every person who's ever said that's gone there and discovered that they're outnumbered by 99 other senators who are all cleaning up Washington their way. So
Yeah.
one of the things I want to bring up is that the whole business model as being a superior way of doing business, excuse me, I shouldn't even do the word business, as a superior model, period, that deserves questioning all by itself.
I definitely agree.
That we don't run our families like businesses. At least I don't run mine. In fact, I don't run my family. It's a collective endeavor. We don't run neighborhoods with bosses. We have to start questioning the assumption that the quote business model should drive all of the things we do in life. In fact, we should question its legitimacy outside of business at all, and sometimes even within business.
We definitely have some issues with pure unfettered capitalism on our podcast here.
Yeah.
So this could definitely something that can bring into to your aspirations in Congress is you have come out openly to support the We the People Act, and this is a transparency act.
Yes,
and I guess give everybody that listening an idea of kind of what that is and why you support it.
Well, I haven't looked at the text for some time. You're the first guys to ask about that in weeks.
Oh, wow.
Senator Tom Udall, and I'm looking at Representative, I think, Tim Rice.
Jeff Merkley. Jeff Merkley.
There are a couple of other guys who've been in there. They introduce it every session. Okay, they're Democrats. Yep. You know where they're going. But their proposal is to end gerrymandering, especially to let go of the dark, to expose dark money. Those are the two key elements. Now, states have prerogatives, and we can't tread on them because that's the nature of our Constitution. But the nature of of gerrymandering is such that even here in Michigan, we are at last looking at a real initiative, and I am horrified that our Attorney General, the one who's running for governor, is trying to stop 500,000 Michiganians from getting something on the ballot because somehow they don't represent the will of the state more than he does. Well, we'll let that go for the moment. So gerrymandering is a very big deal, although you should check out, I think it's the Upshot, which is the statistics-driven column out of the New York Times, although it could be the 538, that points out that even with gerrymandering ruled out, we have so self-segregated ourselves in the last 20 years that it may not be the only thing we need to do. Yes, we need to stop it right now, but it won't solve everything because one of the realities, gentlemen, is that we have resegregated ourselves racially and we've even more segregated ourselves economically so that by the time you create these nice square districts, what you've got are rich districts and poor districts, black districts and white districts, because we've all chosen to live that way, which is hideous. So we're going to need to have some flexibility as we approach this, because the issue is more than gerrymandering. It's the dark money. It's the voter suppression. It's the ID laws. It's all the stuff that's meant to keep us from being democratic, not only as a party, but as a people themselves.
Yeah, and it's amazing because I don't think people understand what's happened to us over the last even 50 years, and people don't understand how politics have changed. And it's amazing because, I've indirectly known you for the last, let's say 5 years because of the work I've done with CFI. And, it's kind of one of those things when all of a sudden we see somebody like you running, I go, hey, you're almost a better candidate than somebody on a secular side of things because you can reach out and kind of cross that path and say, hey, I'm for everybody, and you've spent your life doing that.
As a matter of fact, because I come from what is called the liberal religious tradition, I'm in a real small minority. And if you ask any racial minority or religious minority, they will tell you they grow up being multicultural. I can talk Catholic. I can do Protestant. I worship in a synagogue on a regular basis. I'm going to be visiting the masjid this Friday to remind them to go to vote. I've hung around with the Sikhs. I know from my Hindus. And the cool part is I have some banging good atheists in my crew as well. It's wonderful.
So one of the big things, I see, right, you have to go vote and help change some of these policies that are coming out, right?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So one of the big things I always ask is Planned Parenthood, right? And I know, in fairness, I guess I'll give it away here. Your church has always been very proactive in the local Planned Parenthood community.
I'll go further. The local Planned Parenthood group was organized in my church in the 1960s.
Oh, wow. That's even better.
Oh, yeah. And they're very proud of that fact, and I'm very proud of them for doing that. They are also the place that the local ACLU got organized 50 years ago. Now, that was then, this is now, but we retain a high sense of commitment to civil liberties as a spiritual and a religious thing, not just a political thing. That how can you be an authentic human being in any sense if you cannot express your values and live them out in a way that gives you authenticity? And like it or not, if I want to be free to express my views, I got to give that liberty to you too. I can't be, well, I get to be free and you don't. You see where I'm going?
Yeah.
Okay. So my tradition that I came from, the one I serve here, is that a truly authentic spiritual life would grant the same liberties to everyone that you ask for yourself.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. In fact, it was Immanuel Kant, that great old philosopher, who really came up with the idea. He called it the categorical imperative. And his notion was really simple, that when it comes to ethical decisions, you should always do whatever you would think should be universally possible. In other words, you don't get to have special rights and other people have less rights. That's the categorical imperative. So I kind of like it. I mean, it's kind of formal and stuffy, but it kind of works.
It definitely reminds me of some of the things that you used to do on your show on WPRR, Faith and Reason. So you got a little experience in radio. It's nice to see that you're basically dealing with some of the logical attributes of faith and belief and reason, but you're also doing it from a I guess a way that isn't going to be so apologetic. We do run into some of those nice fellows around here from time to time, but I just want to say that what you've been doing, it's really refreshing, and I definitely hope that all of our listeners, anybody who's in your district, goes and checks out your campaign. And this Thursday, definitely, is it this Thursday or is it next Tuesday? Is the big
the election? The primary is a week from tomorrow.
A week from tomorrow, yes.
And the fact that you don't know that makes me want to point my finger at you, dude.
I'm looking at my calendar. I got it right here.
Yeah. Of course, this is on my mind all the time. It's like I already memorized all the Sundays for near to Christmas, but that's my job, right? But the deal here is, if you are a registered voter right now and you live in Michigan, you need to go to the polls next Tuesday, because one of the reasons those voter suppression laws, those ID laws, those gerrymanders, that dark money all exists is to make you, the listener, you, the citizen, say, oh, it makes no difference. My vote doesn't count. Well, it's a cinch if you don't use it. It won't. But here's the hard part to convince people. If you actually started voting, if everyone started voting, there would be no Republican majority, because they are not the representation of the majority of the people. And they know that. So they keep you away from the polls by telling you it's making it hard. You can only go on election day. You have to bring an ID card, which, by the way, you do not. Yet you can't vote absentee, which, by the way, you can. That you can't do this and you can't do that, and you can't see who's running the campaign, which you can. So the whole point is to discourage us from voting, which means that we basically let them run the country. So here's the deal, people. If everybody votes, everybody wins. Really?
Yeah.
And the closer we get to everybody, the closer we get to the kind of government we want and deserve and need, not the one we deserve by not voting. Does that make sense, guys?
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Okay, so I am a candidate. Yeah, I do want people to vote for me, but more important than that, way more important than that, is voting itself. It really is the thing. If you don't do that, nothing else will come of it. You can go on all the protest marches you want. You can hold up a placard. You can sleep outside and call yourself Occupy Grand Rapids. I don't care. If you don't vote, you have not seized the one power you were granted at the outset, and you got to go and do it. That's just what it comes down to.
So one of my questions is, what is one of the largest burning topics that you have that you want to go help change when you get elected?
Well, probably the one that comes up the most is affordable health care. Not to say that's the most important one, but when you need it today, and you don't have a chance to go and shop for it and things like that. Now, I think Senator Sanders, was on the right path by suggesting we look at Medicare for all as a path to a universal, affordable health care system. And I mention all those words very deliberately because Medicare isn't a pay-all thing. By the way, guys, I am 65. I have a Medicare card. And that means I know what Medicare pays for and what it doesn't. In some respects, it's very much like a basic health care policy you could buy on the health exchange. Doesn't pay everything. You still got to do the copay thing and the deductible thing. But the cost of buying the insurance is extremely low. So that makes it an appropriate foundational vehicle for most people. And making it available for more people is probably what we're going to have to do anyway, because the current system is unsustainable, financially, organizationally, technically unsustainable. Physicians who have opposed universal health coverage since it was first proposed by Teddy Roosevelt are finally admitting, I can't take this anymore. Hospitals are beginning to say, we can't take this anymore. The system cannot go on. So it's going to fall apart. And my idea is, let's not wait for it to fall apart. Let's start making the transformation, but let's do it incrementally so that we don't have chaos in the middle. So we're going to get Medicare for all. And I think the way to do that is to start insuring different segments of the population right now. For example, no child in America can be said to have any control over their parents' wealth. We should put every child in America on Medicare now. Yeah, it costs money, but that money will be offset in part by the premiums you pay less of because you're now Medicare is covering them, and also by raising the ceiling on taxable income, which is now set fairly low. If we did that, we would be able to accommodate every child on Medicare because most of them are wonderfully healthy. But when you've got a sick kid, a really sick kid, having to worry about the bills and the kid is a punishment no parent deserves. So morally, practically, it's just the way to go. But then again, you can also think about veterans who need to get health care from the VA. But many of them don't need it for military purposes. They're just poor. Why don't we put them on Medicare rather than making them go all the way to Battle Creek to go to a doctor?
Thank you.
And that doesn't. And that's really stupid. Now they're entitled to the health care because they did their active duty, but they don't have to go all 80 miles to get to see a doctor. Just put them on Medicare. And ultimately, we should allow small businesses and individuals to choose Medicare as their primary carrier. And here's where market forces are helpful. That's such a good carrier that it will absorb so much of the market that the private insurers will have to adapt to the niche markets where they belong, which, by the way, is exactly how it works in Britain, Canada, France, Switzerland, and other places, where they have a primary insurer that's paid through taxation, and there are niche providers for those people who want additional or unusual coverage and can afford it. So that if we will end up in the system we want, if we just start putting people in groups onto Medicare and allowing other people to migrate there. And if we do it conscientiously, consciously, and affirmatively, we won't have the chaos of resistance and retreat. At least I don't think so. maybe someone else knows better than me. After all, I'm only 65 and I'm not an expert.
Well, one of the things is your campaign is still relatively young. I mean, we have guys like Justin Amash and Bill Heising in the area that have just like you said, they're career politicians, and they've got these war chests and they've got these paper trails that are a mile long. What have you put together any other any bills or anything, or any kind of like seeds of bills that you would be liking to put together? Something in education. I noticed that was something that you had in your about page on your page.
Well, the formal legislation, believe it or not, is not written by legislators. It's written by staffers and by groups paid by Congress to put it in legal language. So, no, I have not gotten to the point of putting together, or shall we say, legal language that goes around that. I'm going with priorities. I'm going with commitments. I'm going with a focus on children, families, communities, and democracy. And because politics is a give and take on the best of days, my notion is I want to make children healthy. I want to make families strong, communities vigorous, and democracy strong. And I will dicker with anyone who can help me get there. I'm not the author of the perfect bill or the perfect law. I just want to make sure we get there. So, as a novice politician, I can't say I've got expertise. What I've got is commitment. What I've got is clarity about what I believe is important, and a willingness to shall we say, not trade away my my political advantage. Excuse me. Let me look at it this way: not to prefer my political life over the life of my constituents. How about that?
Amen. Am I allowed to say that as an atheist?
Yeah, you're allowed. That's just Hebrew for I agree.
Hey.
Okay, so that's all right. It's and by the way, the Arabic is identical to it. Amin means yep, let that happen. That is for sure. So I'm sensing that this might be an election in which people would say, why don't we put a few capable citizens in the middle of this who, if nothing else, will question the status quo and not be trying to climb up a power ladder to get anywhere, who really are interested in saying, hey, the people in my district really need this. And they're willing to live with that, not with if I get to buff my vest buttons and get on a cool committee and stuff like that. I really have no desire to climb any ladders. I'm doing this because I really think it's time that someone cares about the people, not about the party or the power.
Well, that's something that we've been wanting to hear some of that from our local politicians. And I think with the last presidential election, we're going to see they're saying that this year is going to be another textbook year of the woman. We're seeing this, the female Democratic candidates are really, really growing. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has been an amazing. She was just in town the other day to stump for Abdul, and I mean, we're really seeing, hopefully, that the outsider perspective is going to push back a little bit, because one of the things that I think you have to strengthen is you basically have your faith background, which is very enticing to a lot of people in the area as a position of a man of God. That a lot of people in the area can okay, we have that in common now. Now let's talk about healthcare. You want to help everybody get healthcare, and you have some support of that. Hopefully that's enough to bring people in. But what else? So let's say that you're reaching across the aisle to like the Amish guys that are on the fence. Like, what kind of little thing do you think you have that can kind of bring people on the fence over? Because you've got people like me and Chris without question, because that's just we're going to vote blue. So how are you going to get some of those middle ground guys?
And the idea that we can have this big blue wave and Democrats can run the world, enjoy. But that's not going to last. That's exactly why we have the Reds there now, as it were, because there was this big surge in 2008, and they came back. And guess what? The Republicans are not going to go away and say, oh, my gosh, we lost. We have to leave. They're going to come back, and they will come back very vigorously. And as long as we play this winner-take-all politics, we're going to be going back and forth and back and forth. The thing I mentioned about healthcare is actually something you can see pieces of in sensible conservatives, because they know the system is unsupportable. Mm-hmm. And so that's the point, is that you get ideological conservatives who will only be satisfied if we dismantle the government itself. I mean, people way over on the Rand Paul end of the world who really take Ayn Rand as being like a prophetess. And there's no convincing them they're wrong, because like a true fundamentalist of another kind, that's their world. They can't see it through another lens. And to some extent, Mr. Amash is an ideologue of his own in a libertarian way. He's more legalistic than he is idealistic, but that's where he goes. But there are still some conservatives, if you want, they self-described conservatives, who are conservative in that, hey, I'm not sure this will work the way exactly you say it will. Let's call it a kind of government skepticism of a type that you have around religious skepticism. Like, let's not jump in until we know if this is going to work. Let's look at Governor Governor Kasich down in Ohio. So that's because Dennis is also from Ohio. They get mixed up in my old head. At any rate, one of the ideas I suggest in helping education along is that we make community college tuition free. Now, well, and here's the deal. Governor Kasich proposed that a few years ago in Ohio, and his reasoning is very sound. A high school diploma is simply inadequate for a lifetime career. A 4-year degree is financially beyond the means of too many people. If we make community college tuition free, those who need a certificate, training, or preparation for a career that is not a 4-year degree can obtain it without going into debt. That's a big plus right there. Or if you go for a 4-year degree and you get that 2-year associate's, you have in most states, that's 2 years you can bank going into your junior year at a 4-year public college. And at that point, the cost of it went down by 50%.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hey,
okay.
That's amazing.
And guess what? Community college is, well, do you know how much it costs to attend Grand Rapids Community College here in Grand Rapids?
I do,
if
actually.
You live in town.
No. Do you know? Tell me how much you paid in tuition. I know there are other costs.
When I actually took AP calculus or Calc 1 when I was taking in between, and I think it was like $1,200 for the one class when I took that, and that was in 2002, before I went to Saginaw to get my engineering degree.
Yeah, there you go. My church a few years ago, at my request, by the way, so I'll take a little credit here, said, I found out what the total tuition per year was to attend GRCC full time. It was between $4,000 and $5,000 a year.
Man.
Now, that's bargain basement for a lot of people, but here's the sad fact. Many of those students who are attending, high school graduates, those who have been out of high school for a couple of years and want to get back to school, even that's too much for them to pay.
Yeah.
And so we give an annual full ride scholarship that the school administers, but that's one person. So imagine being in a family where even that much money is too much, or what often happens in ways that we don't recognize is someone goes to community college, but they have to work at the same time. They still have to take out a loan because the family doesn't have the money. They can't complete the coursework because of their job, but they're now on the hook for the education loan that they already had. And that's where we also get lives being wrecked. So if we could take the tuition out of community college, which is not as expensive when you put it all together, let's think, how about an aircraft carrier? Can we afford an aircraft carrier to put every kid in America through community college, or those that want it? I think this is a practical possibility. And if a Republican, and guess what, the governor of Kentucky also had the same idea. I think this is a place where we can find not only common ground, but forward progress. Because like it or not, even state governors, no matter whether they're Republican or Democratic, still have to balance their budgets and still have to produce goods, because we get most of the government goods we see, you, me, and everybody else, not from the feds, but from our states with, the police, the schools, the sewers, and all that kind of stuff. So that is a Republican idea that has progressive possibilities. How about that?
Yeah. And one of the other things, and it's kind of where I work, we have individuals that are going to school at the same time. This lady at my work happens to be a single mother. She's going to school full time, trying to find a better job. And here she comes to me and says, hey, can you guys be flexible with my schedule? Because I don't know what else to do. I not only have to pay for my school, I have to pay for childcare.
Yep.
I have to continue to work full time if I want benefits. And so, for me, the big thing is when politicians want to walk into Congress and they want to say, hey, I'm for basic income. I'm for universal or single payer health care. I'm for reimbursement on childcare. Those are the things that attract me, because why do we want to dumb down the society? We don't want that. We don't want a society where they're going to sit around and be like, well, we'll vote for whatever, or, hey, this is what angers me today, therefore I'm voting for it. We don't want that. We want educated people, even if they disagree with me. And I guess I should say that tentatively because I like to argue with people quite a bit. But
I'm going to be a little bit cynical compared to you, which is to say, I think that going back to the voter suppression laws, the idea of a well-educated and alert public rarely has served the political interests of the party in power.
Yeah, that is a pretty common insight. One of the things that Noam Chomsky always liked to say is that whenever he finds a situation where somebody's in power in a position of strength and they are oppressing or doing injustice to a people, that it's really easy to see which side morally he should be on. He's always siding himself with the victim in the situation, and you usually find that is the better place to be. And that can happen on both sides of the political spectrum.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and my father, a Baltimore native himself, required me to become acquainted with a writer from the 1930s, Henry Louis Mencken. You may know of him.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, a notable religious skeptic from long ago, and extremely funny, and with an acid wit. And he is famous for saying, nobody ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American public.
Well, he gained prominence and a bunch of notoriety with the quotation that was turned into a meme about President Trump, basically that one day the American people will have an egotistical maniac, basically, as their deepest and darkest desire. It's something along those lines. And I mean, that's how a lot of people have come to know him just recently in our generation.
Oh, yeah. And he was very much a conservative in the old-fashioned sense of being skeptical of promises of power and good outcomes. He was not at all, he was a very deep skeptic of the ability of government to do good. And I think to some extent, we should always be skeptical of the use of power. But the skeptical does not mean that it is wrong to use it altogether. That's a tough discipline. My libertarian Republican friends say, well, government inevitably corrupts. And I said, well, so does business, but we don't see you trying to stop them either. It's the accumulation of power. It's not where it is, it's that it is. That is the issue. By the way, did you catch the Times this evening? The president and his administration are unilaterally changing an IRS rule that will allow people who claim capital gains to reduce the value of their capital gains in order to, and giving them essentially a $100 billion tax relief over the next 10 years. Go check it out.
That's something we've been worried about for wealth redistribution, and that would actually be a good place for you to take from it.
It's being taken from poor people from their Section 8 housing and being handed up to the rich. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not exactly the way it goes. We're reducing the size of government, and we're doing that by making the poor pay more rent and giving the rich more money not to pay their rent with. I think it's morally bankrupt, and I wonder if there will be any outrage from his own party, but I don't think so.
Well, that's one of the things that I actually would like you to comment on. Obviously, you just mentioned capital gains. Is the capital gains and some of the workarounds for pass through incomes and a lot of the things that business changes as far as the tax plan this year? Are those some of the things an area where you would look to gain some of the money to pay for some of your ideas and thoughts? Because that it's got to come from somewhere, and raising the taxes on the little guys is going to be a hard sell.
Oh, I understand.
I think capital gains is a good place to start.
I agree. And capital gain, I think we should just tax income at the same rate, period. And I understand the rationale, that this is what builds the country. But I'm sorry, that's essentially coming up with the excuse, well, we need rich people to stay rich so they can fund the rest of us. I'm just not buying that as a legitimate argument anymore. So essentially it's giving into a neo-feudalist notion that we need very rich people to hire us so their boots can get polished and their horses can get curried, which is what was true 150 years ago. That's not the way you drive an economy, by giving rich people money so they can hire the rest of us to serve them. That's called feudalism. It died. Are we done with that yet?
I got to stop you there though a little bit, and I only disagree with that in the aspect of, if you do that, what are you going to do to control the amount of wealth that the wealthy are bringing in? And I could pick
Dude, they're not bringing it in. They're running organizations filled with people that are doing the work.
Exactly.
So
and nobody's getting paid for it.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that the money flow that we have, the biggest problem, and it's the one that's the hardest to sell, which is ironic, is that we've had 30 to 40 years of constant erosion of the capacity of workers to organize and bargain effectively. We have demonized unions as corrupt and foul-mouthed, with guys with turned noses and bad speech. But the reality is that were it not for organized labor, there would be no weekends, no holidays, no sick pay, no overtime, no workplace safety. It would not exist because the folks who run businesses are not interested, and this is their nature. This is not because they're bad people. It's because when you're in charge, this is what you do. They will always look to minimize costs. Have you ever been to Lowell, Massachusetts? You should go there. There's a museum of early American industry, which was the textile industry, in which young women who were not able to get married because they came from poor families were essentially indentured to textile companies, spinning cotton that was picked by slaves into cloth that was then sent overseas. And they lived essentially as indentured servants, working 12-hour shifts from the age of 10 and 11 and 12. And is that better than starving to death? Yes, but that doesn't. But being better than awful is not good. So does that make any sense? So it does. It's re-empowering the worker, whoever that worker is, whether it's a burger flipper, whether it's a paper pusher, whether it's a data entry person. There has been a consistent dismantling of the capacity of workers to organize and bargain and demand a share of the profit, a suitable share. One of the things I mention on my website is the notion of the triple bottom line. Do you know what this is, gentlemen?
No.
Go ahead.
The triple bottom line, and I'm trying to remember this because I'm not in front of my computer, is profit for the company, wages for the workers, and well-being for the community around it. And they include the environment in that, because all businesses, no matter as they get to scale up, are in the business to make money. I don't begrudge people wanting to make money. You're getting paid. I'm getting paid. We're getting paid. We like getting paid. We like having enough money to do the things we need and wish to do. I don't begrudge people making a profit. What I do begrudge is when that profit is exacted in a way that deprives the worker of the worth of his work or her work. There is a passage in the Christian scripture that is pointed to in that movie called Lilies of the Field. And Sidney Poitier points to a passage reminding the sister he's working for that the laborer is worthy of his hire. And a whole lot of ancient laws, religious and otherwise, were designed to prevent employers and sometimes owners of people from exploiting their workers. And yet we have allowed the decay of worker rights and worker capacity, which has done wonders for stock and wonders for people at in the corner suites. But today, the worker who is making 2% more than she or he did 2 years ago is still finding that the rent has gone up 10 and 15%. So they're not getting ahead. They're getting more, but they're not getting ahead.
Yeah, the numbers just came out for inflation for this year was over 3-something percent, 2.9%. Where wage growth was only 2.1, 2.2. So essentially, if your wages didn't go up, you are actually making less money, even if the dollar amount is still exactly the same.
Exactly. Even if you made marginally more dollars, the things that are essential, especially housing. Take a look at the New York Times from Saturday, a long article about the affordable housing crisis. About half of the people in the United States who have full-time jobs cannot afford appropriate housing for less than less than like 40% of their income. There are people who are spending 60 and 70% of their monthly income on housing, which makes them poor in every other sense of the word. But the Housing and Urban Development Department, you remember Ben Carson?
Yeah.
Is proposing that we should keep people from becoming dependent on government stuff and is now shrinking the support for affordable housing known as Section 8 so that people don't become dependent on the government. Well, no, they're going to become dependent on the sidewalk unless they do something about it.
Well, I wonder if he's dependent on the government to pay for those $10,000 plates that he likes to buy.
Who knows? Who knows?
So I do want to.
I'm not going to make this personal. That's what other people do. I'm just saying that there is some underlying assumptions about the nature of wealth and value and people's value that need to be revisited. We need to give workers more room to organize rather than less, and they have been systematically and consistently limited by right-to-work laws, by rulings from the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. Organized labor has been weakened for the good of the stockholder and at the depreciation of the worker, and that is what the triple bottom line is about. If your profit comes at the expense of the well-being of your workers, the company should pay for it. Which is why let me make one more comment here. I suggest that we restore the corporate tax rate to where it was, which was high. I understand. Even moderate economists called it high. But let's then allow good companies, if they wish to be good, to earn that back in tax credits by meeting the triple bottom line. Not just the money for their stockholders, but if they pay a living wage to their workers, they can perhaps get a good tax credit, so they get a little credit for doing the right thing. If they go toward greener energy and they limit their emissions and do their best not to foul the environment, they should get a tax credit. So yeah, let's tax them a little bit, but only if they meet the triple bottom line.
So I was going to ask you what you would do to fix some of that, but you just said, hey, I want to raise corporate taxes. There's people on the opposite side that, that are also liberal, that think that raising corporate taxes, allowing those things to happen, actually lends a larger voice to corporations, which is where we've ran into this. And I guess I'll challenge a little bit just because that's my personality. I'm going to challenge you a little bit in saying, if we eliminated some of the corporate taxes, you would reduce the amount of lobbying, in my opinion.
Why would that? Why? What would be the incentive? They have more money. They still have power. Their lobbying is for their benefit no matter what. They
You-
will
you're-
lobby us until their taxes are zero. They'll lobby us until we're paying them to make a profit.
So you're
I'm sorry.
correct. I agree with you.
So
I agree with you in that. Hold on.
why would they stop? In fact, they're getting paid off to some extent. I don't believe lowering corporate taxes reduces corporate influence. I simply do not.
Okay. So if you go back to that, though, and you go back
Yeah.
to say, hey, we're going to lower the corporate taxes or eliminate them. And what we're going to do is we're going to create two different things. We're going to create laws that allow you to not hide your money. That's the first thing that we're going to do. And the second thing we're going to do is increase taxes on the riches. So if let's say your salary is $400,000 a year, right? But you have all sorts of company perks. You're going to get taxed on those based on whatever the average rate is. So you take and you flip the situation. You say, hey, I want corporations to not be taxed as heavily because I want them out of politics, but I'm going to start taxing the people that own or have a larger sharehold. Same way as if you have larger shares, right? We have larger shares. Like, let's say I owned, 50 Apple shares, right? When Apple does well, they pay their stockholders well, right? I should be taxed for that. And the taxation rates should go up based on the types of shares. So if your businesses go up and they make a lot more money, and again, I'll knock Apple, and you don't hear that very often. Apple has some very unfair business practices when it comes to some of the companies they employ. 100% across the board. And I'm an Apple supporter. But the deal becomes is I don't believe by giving them increasing their corporate taxes that it's going to fix that. I believe that reducing corporate taxes, increasing personal liability, taxing for different special funds they set up, and stopping them from being able to hide their money is a greater gain in the long run of things than giving just a corporate tax.
Well, remember where I said raise it and then give direct, clean incentives for lowering it by meeting certain criteria around business practices, wages that are paid, and community responsibility, including environmental stuff. In other words, if you don't play in the sandbox nice, we're going to take a lot of money because that's what we have to use to clean up what you do. You see where I'm going? That's what it comes down to. If a large company wants to pollute a lot, fine, but let's make their taxes way high so we can take the money and clean it up for them. That's the point. They can either not make a mess in the first place, or they can pay for someone else to clean it up. But let's make not cleaning it up in the first place preferential by saying, okay, if you're going to make this kind of money, that's great, but you're going to pay these people at the rock bottom you possibly can and give your stockholders astonishing amounts of money. Fine, but we're going to claw back a lot of that in taxes, and you're going to be so. In other words, let's provide economic incentives for both worker security and dignity, and community care and support, so that those taxes are really a threat rather than a reality. If you see where I'm going, and I'm not disagreeing with you, I think that a number of different incentives can be put in place so that the natural desire to make the most amount of profit is mitigated by the costs that those profits exact on the rest of us.
Man after my own heart.
The church I served in Brooklyn, New York, had a philanthropist who made a lot of money, and he built a lot of affordable housing. And his motto was philanthropy plus 5%. He was only going to make a 5% profit on whatever he did. And therefore, he was able to offer lower rents to people in the neighborhoods because he wasn't trying to maximize his profit. He was trying to do a social good and a financial good. I think it's time to re-inject that notion that a corporation has a responsibility to its community, and if they don't hold it up themselves, we will take it from you and do it on your behalf. And I think that's a healthy above-board relationship. Mm-hmm. That's just me, though. Well, I mean, I'm just a preacher. I don't know nothing about business.
You can tell you're a preacher. I can tell you that. Yeah. You could definitely tell we had a preacher on tonight.
Well, but that's okay. But you notice I'm not throwing anything at you. No Bibles are hitting you on the head here, right? And I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm just trying to make a point. That's all. And I'm not sure. And again, I'm not the perfect guy, and I don't have the perfect answer. I just want to consider some other choices so that in the end, we don't get stuck in the ruts that tax laws and other things have built. The tax laws we have are with the new tax law fixed nothing. We have a Swiss cheese of incentives, of credits, of other things, all of them exacted through the dickering of politics, and I understand that. So I'm not the expert, but maybe we could make it a little more transparent so that people felt a little less like they were being cheated all the time. Couldn't we? Maybe.
Yeah. You would think so. And in fairness, that's what exciting is for us, right? Like we have a podcast. We're not like the most popular thing in the world, but we enjoy what we do, and we really like talking to the politicians that are going to be the upcoming
local.
Yeah, inside of the government, right?
Yep. Now I'm going to say something. We're getting close to the top of the hour. I know that. Far more important than voting than the president and the Congress is your state legislature.
Amen.
And people don't think that. They think, that's just the state. No. That's where the real action is, people. Because in 2020, that's 2 years out, there's going to be a census. And if we don't have this voters, not politicians, anti-gerrymandering thing, that will be the next time your legislature will decide what districts you live in, not just your congressional district, your state house district, and your state senate district. And they will set rules that will govern also your county districts. And they all overlap, and they're a real mess. That will set the rules for elections for the next 10 years. And so right now it is far more important from a long-term perspective to make our state legislature less Republican, less conservative, more Democratic. And I mean that in both large D and small d senses. That's where the investment in the future is going to take place. I hate to tell you guys and anybody who's listening, we're not going to impeach the president. There's not going to be that much of a change. Even if the Dems take over the House and they impeached him, the Senate will not convict him. And just to make sure we're all clear about, even if that could happen, 2 words should make us think twice. President Pence.
Yes.
So I'm not sure
scary.
that we would be at all better off. It is far better for us to stop fighting the immediate fires. Yeah, we need to bank the fire that's there. That is Mr. Trump. But if we really seriously want to make a long-term change, we have to create a Democratic Party from the ground up. And I mean one that is rooted in the people in neighborhoods and in cities and towns, one that's re-engaged with their lives, because while we really do have the people's well-being at heart, they don't know and they don't believe us. And that means they're willing to believe the other guy because the other guy's willing to promise them anything. But we don't, because we're fatally honest sometimes. So we have to create a Democratic Party that is as connected to the people as it should be. And that's going to take years and years.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, I have 2 things. Yeah. The first one is, I'm going to ask you a question in a second. Then after that, you're allowed to plug anything you want.
Okay.
Absolutely everything. Every media source you're on, please go ahead and plug it. We do have the link to your website for anybody listening. It's right in the show description, so you can find it. Click on it. Yeah. You can support Fred in his effort to replace Justin, which is important in my opinion, all across the board. Mm-hmm. But for me, the last, I guess it's a kind of 2-parted question, right? One is, what's a big bill or something you want to propose once you get elected? What's that one thing? And then again, how do you get to bring it back to Grand Rapids? How do you get to put Grand Rapids on the map so we don't have to sit inside of a red state? We can be proud and say, hey, look, we have somebody that's progressive, somebody that wants to stand up for human rights, that wants to push against a corporate system and try to make life a little bit better for those of us who have to work every day.
Yeah. Well, I'll go back to almost where I started, because the thing that I would, if I could get every child in America health coverage, that would be enough for me, would be enough for the country. But I've had a child who was sick and one that eventually died. And we didn't have to worry about health care because we had good insurance, but I saw others who did. And the pain in those families was astronomically high on their hearts. So if I could find a way to take that fear away so they could just be parents, that would be the achievement I would have won on my day. He gave children health care. I would be delighted to get that much done. And that would have a profound impact on every family, and especially the poorer families here in Grand Rapids. When we start delivering the care and dignity that ordinary people deserve, I think people will sense it, that we were working for them, that we want their well-being. Honestly, going back to what you asked about the Democratic Party, when I mentioned the Democratic Party, if you can make the lives of those who struggle because they're poor or unemployed or sick or old or young a little less terrifying, that is what we're here to do. Now, I know that's where Justin and I are different. He is very devoted to preserving the integrity of the Constitution. But in my cheeky little way, gentlemen, I remind those who appreciate him that the people were not made to serve the Constitution, but the Constitution was made to serve the people. And when it fails to serve the people, it is up to the Congress to make the people, remember that the people are the ones who created it, and they are there to serve the people, not just the Constitution. By the way, you can reach me at my website, as you pointed out, fredwooden.com. I am on Facebook a lot. And otherwise, just vote, people. Just vote. Get out there and do it. It would really smack people silly if a lot of people voted in a primary for the first time in a lot of years. Let's scare the Jesus out of them, people. Get out there and vote.
That's beautiful. Thanks again, Fred.
Hey,
I definitely
glad
love
to
having
spend
you here.
the time. Good luck, gentlemen. Keep the faith in whatever you got, and you do have it. You do have faith. It's just not the one that everybody else thinks of. But you believe in something, and I believe in it too, I can tell.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We believe in humanity. Thank you so much for listening to Cellar Door Skeptics tonight. We'll be back next week with another amazing episode. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker. CellarDoorSkeptics.com.